A single father accused of stalking a woman he'd never met. A fake profile built in his name. Threats sent at midnight from a shadow wearing his face. When Lena Rowan stormed onto Nolan Hayes' porch with a shotgun in trembling hands, she was certain she had found her tormentor. She was wrong. The real enemy was watching them both from a glass tower 2 counties away, and he had already decided that one of them wouldn't live long enough to figure it out. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a like and tell me in the comments which city you're tuning in from, so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. The morning the woman came for him, Nolan Hayes was standing in the mudroom pulling on a pair of boots that had seen too many winters. The left one had a split along the heel he kept meaning to patch. The right one fit fine. He had coffee on the stove and a 6-year-old at the kitchen table drawing what looked like either a dinosaur or a very angry dog. It was hard to tell. Dad, is a raptor faster than a cheetah? Probably not, bud. But it has claws. Cheetahs have claws too. Eli considered this for a long moment, chewing on the end of his pencil. Then why do people care about raptors? Nolan almost laughed. He hadn't laughed much in the last 4 years, not really, not the kind that came up from the chest without asking permission first. But the kid did it to him sometimes. Asked a question like that and the answer just wasn't anywhere he could reach. I don't know, Eli. Eat your eggs. They're cold. They were hot 10 minutes ago when I put them down. I was drawing. Well, now they're cold, so that's a lesson. He poured himself a cup, black, and stood at the sink looking out at the field. Frost on everything. The kind of November morning in Missouri where the grass looked like it had been dipped in sugar and the breath came out of the horses in long white rivers when they walked. His father had built the house they were standing in. His grandfather had cleared the land it sat on. 140 acres of rolling pasture and tree line, and a pond down past the southern fence where he used to take his wife, Rachel, to watch the herons in the summer before she got sick. He didn't go down to the pond much anymore. He was 32 years old, and he had the kind of face that made people at the feed store assume he was closer to 40. Quiet around the eyes. Hair he cut himself when he remembered, which wasn't often. A beard he kept trimmed only because Eli had told him once it scratched too much when they hugged. The day Rachel died, Nolan had made a list in his head of the things he was going to have to do alone from then on, and the list had been so long it stopped being a list and became just the rest of his life. So he'd narrowed it. Raise the boy. Keep the land. Don't fall apart where anyone could see it. That had been the plan for 4 years. It had mostly worked. And then the tires came up the drive. He heard them before he saw them. Gravel popping, somebody driving faster than the road wanted. He set his coffee down and went to the window. An old Bronco, green, mud up past the wheel wells, coming hard around the bend in his driveway. He didn't recognize it. He didn't recognize most vehicles these days. The people he knew drove the same trucks they'd driven in high school. The Bronco skidded to a stop about 10 feet shy of his porch, rocking on its suspension, and a woman got out before the engine was even off. She was small. That was his first thought. Small in the way some people looked small because they were holding themselves too tight, arms pulled in, shoulders up by her ears, dark hair, somewhere between brown and black, pulled back in a knot that had half come loose. A canvas jacket 2 sizes too big. And in her right hand, walking toward his porch in the cold morning light, she was carrying a shotgun. Nolan's stomach went flat. Eli. What? Go to your room. Why? Now, bud. Don't ask. Just go. Something in his voice must have been different because the boy slid off his chair without another word and padded upstairs in his sock feet. Nolan heard the bedroom door close. He heard it reopen, just a crack, which was Eli being 6. He let it be. He went out onto the porch with his hands open where she could see them. Morning, he said. Don't! Her voice cracked on the word. The shotgun was pointed at the ground, not at him, but her knuckles on the stock were bone white. Don't you say a word to me. Ma'am, I don't know who you... I said shut up. She was maybe 10 feet from him. Close enough he could see her face now. She was younger than he'd first thought. 27, maybe 28. She had a scrape along the left side of her jaw like she'd caught it on something. Her eyes were red. Not crying red. The red of someone who hadn't slept, who maybe hadn't slept in days, whose body had started eating itself from the inside out. You're going to stop, she said. You're going to stop right now. Do you understand me? I don't know what I'm supposed to be stopping. Don't. Her voice went up. Don't play that with me. I have had it. I have had it up to here, and I am done. I am done being afraid. I am done looking at my phone and seeing your name. My name. Your name, your face, every night, every goddamn night, at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, telling me you know where I sleep, telling me what I was wearing at the grocery store. Ma'am. And I drove out here. I drove out here because I'm telling you to your face, the next message you send me, the next time I see your name on that screen, I am going to the sheriff and I am going to bury you. I am going to... Ma'am. What? She was breathing hard. The shotgun was still pointed down. He had the sense that she didn't entirely know it was in her hands. I don't own a computer, Nolan said. She stared at him. I have a phone, he said. It's a flip phone. It was $80 at the Walmart in Clinton. I don't know how to use the internet on it. I wouldn't know how to find you on the internet if you wrote me directions. That's not... She started. You're lying. I'm not. You are. You are absolutely lying to me because I have your picture. I have your picture right here. I have... She dug in her jacket pocket with her free hand, one-handed and shaking, and came up with a phone. She thumbed at the screen. She turned it around and held it up. Nolan stepped off the porch and walked toward her, slowly, keeping his hands visible. She didn't move. She didn't raise the gun. He got close enough to see the screen. It was him. Or it was somebody who had his face. The photo was one he actually recognized, taken at a barn raising 2 summers back. Somebody had posted it on the volunteer fire department's Facebook page, and his sister-in-law had printed him a copy. He was standing next to a beam with his shirt sleeves rolled up, squinting. Underneath the photo was a name. Nolan Hayes. And under that, a message, time-stamped 3 nights ago at 2:47 in the morning. I saw you at the Casey's on Route B, blue shirt. You shouldn't wear blue. It makes you look like her. Nolan read it twice. I don't know who her is, he said quietly. The woman made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was something closer to an animal noise, short and sharp, the sound of someone whose last reserve has just cracked. My sister, she said. Okay. She died 2 years ago. She was wearing a blue shirt. I'm sorry. Don't. Her eyes filled up and she blinked hard, furious, like crying in front of him would be the final insult. Don't you dare! All right. They stood there. The wind moved across the field and pushed a piece of her hair into her face, and she didn't brush it away because both her hands were occupied, one with the shotgun and one with the phone, and Nolan understood suddenly that she had driven here ready to do something she couldn't take back. That was why the gun was still down. Some part of her, some small exhausted part, had been hoping he would give her a reason not to. What's your name? He said. Lena. Lena what? Rowan. Lena Rowan, I'm Nolan. You already know that part. He nodded, slow, toward the phone in her hand. Can I see that again? She hesitated, then she held it out. He looked at the profile. Nolan Hayes. His face. His name. A list of posts going back 6 months, maybe longer. He scrolled with his thumb, and the messages got worse as they went back. Descriptions of her house, of her car, of what she'd cooked for dinner on a Tuesday in September. Photographs he'd never taken, of a woman he'd never seen, walking into a grocery store, standing at a gas pump. There were 64 of them. He counted because counting was something to do with his hands besides shake. Lena, he said, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me. I didn't write any of these. Somebody did. Yeah, somebody did, but it wasn't me. Then who? I don't know. That's not an answer. No, it isn't. He handed the phone back. She took it. She still didn't put the shotgun down, but something in her shoulders had dropped half an inch, and half an inch was enough that he could see she was cold, that the canvas jacket wasn't warm enough, that she'd come out of her house this morning with the kind of adrenaline that had forgotten to pack a coat. Do you want to come inside? He said. No. All right. I'm not coming in your house. All right, that's fair. You could have anything in there. I have a 6-year-old in there. That's what I have in there. Her mouth did something. It was almost a flinch. His name's Eli, Nolan said. His mother died when he was 2. He's upstairs right now because I told him to go upstairs, and he's probably got his ear against the door. And I would really like it if we could keep our voices down because he is a worrier, and he doesn't need another thing. Lena looked at the house. She looked at the porch. She looked at the windows, and Nolan watched her look. and he watched the thing in her face change. Not gentle, not forgiving, but realigning, the way a compass needle moves when it finds out the north. It was pointed at was wrong. "Put the gun in your truck," he said, "and I'll bring coffee out here. We can sit on the porch. There's a heater I can plug in. You don't have to come inside." She didn't answer right away. "Lena." "What? Please." She walked stiff-legged back to the Bronco. She opened the passenger door and set the shotgun on the seat, barrel down, careful, and he could tell by the way she handled it that she knew what she was doing with a gun, that it hadn't been a bluff. She shut the door. She came back and she sat on the top step of his porch with her arms wrapped around her knees like a girl half her age. He went inside. He poured 2 coffees. He called up the stairs. "Buddy, you can come down in about 10 minutes, okay? I'm on the porch with somebody. Everything's fine." "Who is it?" "A neighbor." "I don't know a neighbor." "Well, now we do. 10 minutes. Brush your teeth." "I already did." "Do it again." He carried the coffees out. He handed her one. He plugged in the space heater with the long orange cord he ran out through the kitchen window for exactly this, for early morning fence conversations with the guy who leased the North 40. He sat down on the step next to her, not too close, and he didn't look at her face because he could feel how much she needed to not be looked at. "When did this start?" he said. "March. March of this year." "Yeah, I moved out here in February. I bought the old Pritchard place." "That's right next to me." "I know, that's the point. That's why it's you." "It isn't me." "I know that now." Her voice was low. She wasn't looking at him either. They were both looking out at the field. "I didn't know it 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry about the gun. I'm not sorry I brought it. I'm sorry I pointed it." "You didn't point it. I was going to." "But you didn't." She drank some coffee. Her hand shook against the mug, and she used the other hand to steady it, and he pretended not to see. "I moved out here to get away from somebody," she said. "I'm not going to tell you who, because it doesn't matter, and because the whole reason I came was that I was done with people in my life knowing my business. I wanted a porch, and a dog, and a fence I could see over, and nobody who had my phone number. That was the deal I made with myself." "Okay." 3 weeks in, I started getting the messages. From me. From a person claiming to be you, saying you lived next door, saying you'd seen me unload my truck, saying... She stopped. She shook her head once. "Saying things nobody should know. Things about my sister. Things about the shirt she was wearing the day she died. I don't know how anybody knows those things. I've told maybe 4 people in my life. And the messages said I knew them. The messages said you knew them. Said you'd been watching me for a long time. Said you'd followed me from Kansas City. Said..." Her voice thinned out. "Said my sister was sloppy, and I was going to be sloppy too." Nolan set his coffee down on the step so he wouldn't break the mug. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't." "I'm sorry somebody did that to you." I said don't. "Okay, okay." They sat. "Why me?" he said, after a minute. "Why my name? I'm nobody. I haven't been off this property in 2 weeks. I go to the feed store and I go to the school pickup line and I come home. Why would anybody build a fake me?" "I don't know." "You have to have thought about it." "I've thought about it every minute of every day for 8 months, Nolan." She said his name and it landed strange in her mouth, like she was trying it out for the first time as a real thing attached to a real man and not a shadow on a screen. "I thought it was because you lived next door. I thought it was because you were a widower and lonely and sick in the head. I thought..." She swallowed. "I thought the worst thing about any person is usually true, and that's what I thought about you." "That's fair?" "It isn't fair. It's just what I thought." Somewhere in the tree line behind the house, a crow started up, loud and ugly, and another one answered it from further off. "Did you go to the police?" Nolan said. "Yes." And nothing. "They took the report. They said they'd look into it. They said this kind of thing, from what they could tell, was just some guy playing around, and that unless I could prove you were the one behind the profile, there wasn't much they could do. They said I could get a restraining order. I said a restraining order against a ghost didn't do much. They said it was the best they could offer." "Did you believe them?" "No. Me neither." She looked at him for the first time since they'd sat down. Her eyes were gray. He hadn't noticed before. Gray and tired in a way that made him feel tired too. What do you mean you don't believe them? She said. I mean, this doesn't sound like some bored kid in a basement. This sounds like somebody who put time into it. Somebody who picked me on purpose and picked you on purpose and knew enough about both of us to make it stick. That's not bored. That's work. Somebody's working at this. Why? I don't know. Who would work at it? I don't know, Lena. Her jaw did the hard thing again. She looked back out at the field. The screen door creaked behind them. Nolan turned. Eli was standing just inside it, hair wild on one side from sleeping on it, holding the stuffed dog he only carried when he was nervous. Dad. It's okay, bud. Who is she? This is Miss Lena. She lives on the other side of the creek. Eli considered her through the screen with the grave, evaluating face of a boy who had decided a long time ago that he was in charge of keeping his father safe and did not entirely trust strangers to be anything but strangers. Hi, Lena said. Hi. That's a good dog. He's not a good dog. He bit me once. Oh, I'm sorry. It was okay. He was a puppy. He didn't mean it. Lena nodded, serious. Sometimes they don't mean it. Eli studied her another second. Then he opened the screen and came out onto the porch in his sock feet and sat down one step below them. Not close to her, not far, in the exact spot that said, I am watching this situation and I have not made up my mind about it yet. Nolan put a hand on the back of his son's head for a second and took it away. He's cute, Lena said, quiet to Nolan. He's a handful. I'm a handful, Eli said, not looking back. See? Something happened to Lena's face. It wasn't a smile. It was the place a smile would have been if she'd had one left in her. She looked down at her coffee. I have to go, she said. Okay. I shouldn't have come here like that. I'm glad you did. Don't say that. I'm glad you did, Lena. Because if you hadn't, I'd still be the guy who didn't know somebody was using my face to torture a woman 2 miles away. I'd rather know. She stood up. She was unsteady for a second and put her hand on the porch post. He didn't reach for her. He thought about it and didn't. I need to think, she said. All right. I'll call you. I don't have a number you can call. She almost laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was closer to a laugh than anything else she'd made all morning. Of course you don't. There's a number on the mailbox. Landline. Rings in the kitchen. A landline. Yeah. You really are from another century. I've been told. She walked down the steps. At the bottom, she stopped and turned back. Nolan. Yeah. If we're both telling the truth, if you didn't do it and I didn't do it, somebody out there has spent 8 months of their life pretending to be you and terrorizing me. Yeah. That person is still out there, right now, doing it. I know. What are we going to do about it? He looked at her. He looked at his son on the step below him, pretending not to listen, hair sticking up, sock feet pulled up under him for warmth. He looked at his field and his fence and the patch of frost burning off where the sun was starting to hit it. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm going to find out, and I'd like it if you'd help me. She stood a long time in the driveway with her hand on the Bronco door. The wind pulled at her hair. She didn't say yes, and she didn't say no. She got in the truck and she backed down the driveway, and she was gone around the bend before he realized he was still holding his breath. Dad. Yeah, bud. Was she mad at you? She thought I did something I didn't do. Did you tell her you didn't do it? I did. Did she believe you? I think most of her did. Eli nodded. He had taken this on with the seriousness of a small person who had learned, too early, that grown-ups had problems they sometimes forgot not to talk about in front of him. He leaned his head against his father's knee. Dad? Yeah. Is somebody being mean to her? Yes. Are we going to help her? Nolan looked out at the empty driveway. Somewhere on the other side of the creek, in a house he had driven past 100 times without knowing who lived in it, a woman was walking back into a home where every night at 2 a.m. she had been waiting to see his name on her screen. Yeah, bud, he said. We're going to help her. He didn't know yet how much that promise was going to cost him. He didn't know yet that 2 counties away, in a glass office on the top floor of a building he had never heard of, a man in a charcoal suit was at that exact moment looking at a satellite photograph of Nolan's property and Lena's property side by side, with a red grease pencil line drawn around both of them and the words Phase 1 written across the top. He only knew that this morning had started with cold eggs and a raptor question, and it had ended with a stranger on his porch, and that somewhere between those two things, the life he had built to be quiet had stopped being quiet and was not going to be quiet again for a long, long time. He squeezed the back of his son's neck. "Come on," he said. "Let me make you new eggs. The old ones are still there. The old ones are a lesson, Eli." "What lesson?" "I don't know. I'll think of one by the time we get to the kitchen." He stood up, his knees cracked. He picked up the cold coffee mugs, his and hers, and he carried them inside, and he let the screen door close behind them with a small, tired sound that was the last quiet thing that house would hear for a while. The new eggs went the way of the old eggs. Eli ate half of them and then announced he was full, which in his particular vocabulary meant, "I have decided this meal is over and further negotiation is beneath me." Nolan scraped the rest into the dog bowl, except there wasn't a dog anymore. Hadn't been one since Rachel's black lab had gone gray, and then gone still in his sleep the winter after she died, and Nolan had never gotten around to another one. The bowl was still by the back door. He put the eggs in it anyway. A possum or a raccoon would find them by morning, and that was the way of things out here. Nothing went to waste, not even grief. He stood at the sink and washed the two mugs. Hers had a lipstick print on the rim, the faintest one, pale pink, and it startled him how much it unsettled him to see it. A stranger's mouth. In his kitchen. He rinsed it twice. "Dad." "Yeah." "Are you going to call her?" "I think so." "On the mailbox phone." "She'd have to call me. I don't have her number." Eli considered this. He was back at the table, coloring again. The raptor had acquired a companion now, a smaller shape that might have been another raptor, or might have been a chicken, rendered with the fearless anatomical disregard of a 6-year-old. "If she doesn't call, then what?" "Then I go over there." "By yourself?" "By myself, bud." "What if she shoots you?" "She's not going to shoot me. She had a gun." "I know she had a gun. She put it in the truck. She could take it out of the truck." Nolan turned off the water and dried his hands on the dish rag that had been hanging on the oven handle for longer than he cared to count. "Eli, look at me." Eli looked up. "She isn't going to shoot me. She was scared. People who are scared sometimes do things that look like they're about to hurt somebody, but underneath, they're just trying to stop being hurt themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Kind of." "That's fine. You can understand it the rest of the way later." "Okay." Nolan sat down across from him. He watched his son draw for a while. The pencil scratched and the refrigerator hummed, and outside, a long way off, a train sounded its horn where it crossed the road by Milburn, the long, low note carrying clear across the fields the way it only did on cold mornings. It was the sound of his childhood, and it still, after 32 years, made something in his chest go soft. He didn't have a plan. That was the truth of it. A woman had come onto his property with a gun and a phone and a dead sister and a face of his on a screen, and he had said he was going to help her, and he had meant it, but now that she was gone and the porch was cold and the coffee cups were clean, he could feel the size of what he had just promised. He did not know how the internet worked. He did not know how a person built a fake somebody else on it. He had, in the junk drawer by the refrigerator, a list of phone numbers written on the back of an old feed receipt, and the name at the top of the list was his brother-in-law's, Wyatt Rowan. No relation, just a coincidence of names in a rural county where names repeated themselves like fence posts. And Wyatt was the only person Nolan knew who worked with computers for a living. Wyatt did something with databases down in Springfield that Nolan had never fully understood, but he understood enough to know that when Wyatt came up for Christmas and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, things happened on the screen that Nolan could not have made happen with a year of trying. He pulled the receipt out of the drawer. The tape on the edge had gone brittle. He smoothed it out. "I'm going to make a phone call, bud." "Okay." "Keep drawing." "Okay." He took the receipt and the cordless phone into the mudroom and shut the door between him and his son. Not because he didn't want the boy to hear, but because he didn't want to have to pick his words around him. He dialed. It rang 4 times. "Hayes, this better be good. I'm in a meeting." "Wyatt." "Nolan?" "Yeah." "Jesus, man, what is it? Is Eli all right?" "He's fine. Everybody's fine. I need your help with something." There was a pause on the line. Nolan heard a door close on Wyatt's end, the muffled voices of an office falling away. Wyatt was a good man. He had married Rachel's sister, and he had stood at Rachel's grave with his hand on Nolan's shoulder for a very long time on a day Nolan could not remember much else about. And he had never, in the years since, asked for anything. "Go ahead," Wyatt said. "What do you need?" Nolan told him. He told him slowly, because he wanted to get it right, and because saying it out loud to somebody else made it sound both realer and stranger than it had when it was just him and Lena and the frost on the porch rail. A fake profile. His name. His face. A neighbor he had never met being tormented for 8 months by somebody pretending to be him. Pictures of her he had never taken. Threats he had never sent. Police who had shrugged and filed a report and moved on. When he finished, Wyatt didn't say anything for a while. "Nolan. Yeah. This is bad." "I figured." "No, I mean, specifically, this is bad. The kind of thing you're describing, that's not somebody messing around. Somebody putting 8 months into it and picking the picture and tracking her movements and knowing things about her family. That's—" Wyatt stopped. Nolan could hear him thinking. That's somebody who wants something. That's not harassment. That's a setup. A setup for what? I don't know yet. But people don't build that kind of thing for fun. They build it because at the end of it, there's a payout. Money, usually, or leverage. Somebody wants something from one of you, or from both of you, and they're laying track. Nolan leaned his forehead against the cold door of the mudroom. Can you find out who did it? Maybe. I'd need to see the messages, the whole profile, everything she's got. I'll get it to you. And Nolan? Yeah. Don't go to the sheriff's office again. Not yet. Why? Because if somebody's set this up well enough to fool her for 8 months and put your face on it, they've thought about the sheriff. They've got a next move for when you try to clear your name. You show up down there with a stack of printouts, and you might walk into something worse than what you're already in. Let me look first. Okay? I mean it. Don't do anything stupid. When have I ever done anything stupid? Nolan, you married my wife's sister when you were 23 and you had $200 and a pickup truck with no reverse gear. That wasn't stupid. That worked out. There was a silence. Wyatt was careful, always, about Rachel. He went around the name of her the way a man goes around a hole in a floorboard, knowing exactly where it was without having to look down. Yeah, Wyatt said finally. It did. They hung up. Nolan stood in the mudroom with the phone still in his hand, and then he set it back in the cradle and he went out to the kitchen, and Eli looked up from his drawing. Was that Uncle Wyatt? Yeah. Is he coming for Christmas? Probably. Good. Eli bent back over his paper. I need him to look at something on my tablet. What tablet? The one Grandma got me. That tablet has been in a drawer for a year. That's why I need him to look at it. Nolan laughed, and the sound of his own laugh surprised him for the second time that morning. Something had been loosened. Not anything good, not yet. But the box of his life had been pried open a half-inch, and air was moving in it that hadn't moved in a long time. The phone rang an hour later. He had gone out to the barn to start the truck and let it warm up because the starter had been grinding and he had half a mind to drive into town for a part, and he heard the ring through the open kitchen window, and he came at a run with his breath fogging in front of him. Hello? It's Lena. Okay. I'm not going to come over there. Okay? I want to make that clear. It's clear. But I've been thinking, and I don't know who else in this county I can talk to about this, because everybody I've told so far has either not believed me or has decided I'm crazy, and I cannot do another day of people looking at me like I'm crazy. I don't think you're crazy. I know you don't. That's why I'm calling. He pulled out a chair and sat. Eli was back upstairs. The house was quiet. Through the phone he could hear a kettle whistling in her kitchen and her turning off the burner, and the small domestic ordinariness of it made the hair on his arms stand up. She was 2 miles away. He could, if he wanted to, walk to her house. He had been able to walk to her house this whole time without knowing it. I called my brother-in-law, Nolan said. He works with computers down in Springfield. And he said somebody who puts 8 months into a thing like this isn't doing it for fun. He said they're after something. He said we shouldn't go to the sheriff yet. He wants to see everything you've got first. The messages, the profile, all of it. He heard her breathing on the other end. Short breaths. Thinking breaths. I saved everything, she said. Good. I have a folder, screenshots, every single one, dates, times. I even wrote down where I was when each one came in, because after a while I started to notice. She stopped. I started to notice that the messages always came in when I was alone. If a friend was visiting, nothing. If I was at a restaurant, nothing. The second I was by myself, the second I was walking into my house at night, my phone would buzz. Nolan closed his eyes. Somebody's watching you, he said. Yes. Right now, probably. Probably. Lena. What? When's the last time you slept? I don't remember. He put his elbow on the table and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. He thought about a woman sleeping with a loaded shotgun within reach. He thought about what that did to a person over 8 months, what it did to the way their hands shook when they held a coffee cup, what it did to the red in their eyes. Can I come to you? He said. No? Okay. I don't want you on my property. I understand. It isn't personal. It's very personal, Lena, and that's fine. I understand. She was quiet for a second. There's a gas station on Route B. The Casey's the message mentioned. I'll meet you there. Bring a thumb drive. I don't have a thumb drive. Of course you don't. I can buy one. They sell them at Casey's. Small one, 2 gigs. It's in a rack near the register. It's $5. Okay? 1 hour. 1 hour. She hung up. He looked at the phone in his hand and he realized he was smiling, a small, thin smile, and he did not entirely know why. Something about her. Something about the flat, no-nonsense way she handled a crisis that had broken her down to the studs. There was a spine in her. He could feel it over a phone line. He got Eli down from upstairs. He called his neighbor Merle, who was 71 and had been his father's best friend, and was, in practical terms, the grandfather Eli had never had, and he asked if the boy could come sit for an hour. Merle said of course, and asked no questions, which was one of the best things about Merle. And Nolan drove Eli the half-mile down the road and handed him off with a backpack and a juice box and a promise to be back by lunch. Dad? Yeah. If you don't come back by lunch, Merle said we can have pancakes for lunch. Oh, did he? Merle, leaning on his porch rail, offered a small, guilty grin. Be back by lunch, Eli said. I will. I mean it. I know you do, bud. He drove to Casey's. Route B was a 2-lane blacktop that wound through fields and woodlots and the occasional mobile home set back behind a chain-link fence, and the gas station sat at the intersection where Route B met the old highway, a square beige building with 4 pumps and a hand-lettered sign advertising breakfast pizza. He had been there 1,000 times. He had never once, to his knowledge, been photographed there. Her Bronco was already in the lot. She was sitting in it, watching the road. He pulled up 2 spots away and got out. It was 11 in the morning, and the sun had warmed the day up to where a man could stand outside in a flannel shirt without his teeth chattering, barely. He walked to her driver's side window. She rolled it down. She had put her hair up differently. Her face was scrubbed. She had slept, he thought, at least a little since this morning. Thumb drive, she said. Right. He went inside. He found the rack. He bought a $5 thumb drive from a teenager behind the counter who was more interested in his phone than in Nolan's face, which, given the circumstances, Nolan appreciated. He came back out. She got out of the Bronco with her phone in her hand. She leaned against the hood. He stood a respectful distance away, the way a man stands in line at a funeral home, not wanting to crowd. How do you want to do this? He said. Give me the drive. He gave it to her. She had brought a small laptop from her truck. She opened it on the hood and plugged the drive in. Her hands moved over the keyboard the way a mechanic's hands move over an engine, quick and sure, with a familiarity he didn't have and didn't pretend to. I'm copying everything, she said. The messages, the profile, the pictures. There's also a file with dates and times, and a second file with a list. A list of what? Things I started noticing after a while. Like I said on the phone, patterns. Okay, she typed for a minute. The pump next to them clicked as somebody finished filling a tank. A crow complained from the telephone wire. Nolan stood with his hands in his pockets and watched her work. You're very quiet, she said without looking up. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'm sorry about this morning. You already apologized. I know. I'm just saying it again. She stopped typing. She looked at him across the hood of the Bronco. Up close, in daylight, without a shotgun in her hand, she had a mouth that wanted to be kind, he thought. Somebody had taught her not to let it. Nolan? Yeah. You did not do anything wrong this morning. I know. Then stop apologizing. Okay? She went back to typing. He watched a man at the next pump squeegee his windshield and get back in his truck and drive off. He watched a kid on a bicycle ride past the front of the store with a backpack bigger than he was. He watched the road. Done, she said. She pulled the drive out and held it up. He took it. Their fingers didn't touch. She had arranged them so they wouldn't. Send it to your brother-in-law, she said. Ask him to call me directly once he's looked at it. He can have my number, not my address. He won't ask for your address. I know he won't. I'm telling you anyway. Understood. She closed the laptop. She didn't get back in the truck. She stood there with her arms folded, looking across the road at nothing. The wind had picked up. Her hair moved. He watched her decide something. Nolan. Yeah. There's something else. Okay. 3 weeks ago, a man came to my door. Something in Nolan's gut tightened. What kind of man? He said. The kind that wears a suit in the country, which is already the wrong kind. He said he was from a development company. Meridian something. Meridian Vale, I think. He had a folder. He said he was making offers on a few of the properties along the creek because they were interested in building some kind of resort community, and he wanted to know if I'd consider selling. How much did he offer? $380,000 for the Pritchard place. Yeah, that's high. I know it's high. I paid $190 in February. I told him I wasn't interested. He said the offer would only stand for 30 days. He said if I changed my mind, I could call. Did you tell him about the messages? No, I didn't trust him, and I didn't trust anybody, and it didn't feel related at the time. It feels related now. Yeah. He came back a week later, stood in my driveway. Didn't knock that time. He just stood there next to his car, looking at my house. I saw him through the kitchen window. When I came out onto the porch, he got in his car and drove off without saying a word. Lena, I know how it sounds. Did he come to me? I don't know if he came to you. Did he come to you? Nolan thought. He thought hard. He had not had anybody in a suit on his property that he could remember, not for years, not since the estate lawyer after his father died. But there was a letter, he said. When? I don't know. A month ago. 6 weeks maybe. I threw it out. It was on letterhead. It looked like junk mail, some company offering to buy me out. I didn't read it. Was it Meridian Vale? I don't know. I can look. I take the trash to the burn barrel, but I only burn it when the barrel's full, and I haven't burned it in a while. It might still be in there. Nolan, I know. You need to go home and you need to look in that barrel. I know. This is the thing. This is the thread. I know, Lena. She was breathing differently now, faster. Her eyes had a light in them they had not had this morning. It was the light of a person who had been in the dark for a long time and had just seen a match struck, and was terrified that the match would go out before she could find the candle. If they came to me, and they came to you, she said, and if they offered me $380,000, which is almost twice what I paid, then they want this land bad. They want it bad enough that when I said no, they didn't just walk away. They kept coming. They kept coming, Nolan, and somewhere in there somebody started sending me messages pretending to be you. He stood there on the asphalt of Casey's parking lot, and he felt, for the first time since he was a young man, the particular sick tilt of a world shifting under him. Not grief this time. Grief he knew. Grief was an old friend. This was something else. This was the feeling of realizing that a stranger, somebody he had never met, had been thinking about him for months, planning around him, treating him like a piece of furniture that needed to be moved. They want us to hate each other, he said slowly. What? Think about it, Lena. If you hated me, if you really believed I was the one doing it, what would you do? She stopped. I'd leave, eventually. I'd sell the house and I'd leave. I couldn't live next to you. And if I hated you, if somebody was convincing me you were trying to ruin my life, you'd dig in, you'd fight me. You'd fight dirty, maybe. Or I'd leave too if it got bad enough, if my boy wasn't safe. Yes, either way, one of us sells, maybe both. And they come in and they buy us out cheap because we're desperate to get out. Yes. She had her hand flat on the hood of the Bronco like she needed it to stay upright. The metal was cold. Her knuckles were white against it. Nolan, she said, who does this? Somebody with a lot of money. Who? I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. Something in her face was rearranging itself. Not trust, not yet. Trust was a long road, and he understood that. But the part of her that had been keeping him in a small, dark box marked enemy was, he could see, letting him out of it. I'm going to go home, she said, and I'm going to bolt my doors, and I'm going to wait for your brother-in-law to call me. Okay? If anything happens tonight, if anybody comes to my house, if any new message comes in, call me. Landline rings in the kitchen. I'm going to write that number on my hand. Do that. She got in the Bronco. She started it. She rolled down the window one more time before she put it in gear. Nolan? Yeah. That barrel. Go look in it. Tonight. I will. She pulled out. He stood in the parking lot for another minute with the thumb drive in his fist, so tight it was printing into his palm. Then he got in his truck and he drove home. He picked up Eli. He ate the pancakes Merle pressed on him because refusing Merle's pancakes was an insult in the local dialect, and he drove the boy home with syrup on his fingers and a new drawing in his backpack. Eli fell asleep in the passenger seat on the short drive, his head against the window, mouth open, a small snore. Nolan watched him in quick glances between watching the road and the love he felt for his son in that moment was not the soft love of cards and calendars. It was the hard love of a man who had just realized somebody was coming for his house, and therefore coming, eventually, for his child. He put Eli down for a nap on the couch. He covered him with the quilt Rachel's mother had made, the one with the 9-patch squares in faded blues and yellows, and then he went outside to the burn barrel. It sat at the edge of the pasture 50 feet from the house, a rusted 55-gallon drum with a grate over the top that his father had welded on 40 years ago. It was half full. He dumped it out onto a tarp, old mail, grocery circulars, a catalog from a tractor parts place, a notice from the county about property taxes. He went through it piece by piece, flattening each envelope out, and he found it near the bottom. A white business envelope. Good paper. His name and address printed, not handwritten. The return address embossed in a dark navy blue. Meridian Vale Holdings, LLC. Suite 1400. Kansas City, M.O. His hands were not entirely steady when he opened it. The letter inside was 2 pages. The language was careful. They represented a consortium of investors. They had identified his property as being of interest for a proposed mixed-use development, emphasizing, and here the prose turned slick, the preservation of the pastoral character of rural Missouri while offering contemporary amenities to a discerning clientele. They were prepared to offer, for his 140 acres, the sum of $620,000. Cash, 30-day close. It was more money than Nolan had ever held in his head at one time. At the bottom of the letter was a name. Garrett Voss, Director of Acquisitions. A phone number. A signature that looked like it had been made by a machine. He read it twice. He folded it back up. He put it on the kitchen table, and he sat down across from it, and he looked at it the way a man looks at a snake he has just cornered in a feed shed, without any particular plan, but with the full and sudden understanding that he is now, for better or worse, in a conversation with it. He called Wyatt back. Hayes? Wyatt. What? Meridian Vale. That name mean anything to you? A pause. Say it again, Wyatt said. Meridian Vale Holdings, out of Kansas City. Hold on. There was the sound of typing, a long sound. Too long. Nolan listened to his brother-in-law's breathing on the other end of the line, and he watched the clock above the stove tick through a full minute of its slow round. Nolan? Yeah. Where did you hear that name? It's the company that sent me an offer on my land, and the same company sent a man to Lena's door 3 weeks ago. Jesus. What? Nolan, Meridian Vale Holdings is not a company. I mean, it is technically. It has a state registration and an office and a letterhead, but it's a shell. It's a front. It's the name they use when they don't want their real name on anything. Whose real name? Halverson Group. Nolan had heard of Halverson Group. He had heard of Halverson Group the way anybody in the state of Missouri had heard of Halverson Group, which was that there was a man named Dale Halverson who had built apartment complexes and strip malls and, more recently, a string of gated resort developments in the Ozarks. And his face was on billboards along the interstate with his arms crossed and his teeth very white. And there had been a scandal a few years back about a retirement community he had built where the foundations had started to sink, and then the scandal had gone quiet, which was what scandals did when the man at the center of them had enough lawyers. Halverson is doing this to us, Nolan said. I can't prove that yet, but Meridian Vale is his. It's been his for 4 years. They do his land acquisitions on projects he doesn't want his name attached to yet. It's in the filings if you know how to read them, and I know how to read them. Why wouldn't he want his name attached? Because his name is radioactive with the county commissioners right now, after the retirement home thing. If he wants to get a zoning variance for a new resort, he can't have Halverson Group on the application. It has to come in under a clean name, and the clean name buys the land first, then quietly transfers it to the parent company after everything is approved. Wyatt, yeah. Can you prove any of this? Give me the thumb drive. Give me the messages. Give me the letter. Give me 48 hours. I'll mail the drive tonight. Overnight. Good. Wyatt. Yeah. Why us? Why our 2 properties? This is nowhere. There's nothing out here. Wyatt was quiet a long beat. Nolan? Your land and her land together are how much acreage? Mine's 140. Hers is 60. 200 acres on a spring-fed creek, with county road access on 2 sides. And if I'm reading the topo maps right, a view of the hills to the southwest that would photograph like something out of a magazine. Yeah. That's a resort. That's a $300 million resort with a golf course and a lake and cabins, is what that is. If you can get the land cheap. We aren't selling. No, you're not. Which is why somebody started sending a woman messages 8 months ago to make her hate the man who owned the other half. They didn't say anything for a while. The phone line hissed. Nolan looked out his kitchen window at the pasture. The frost was long gone. The afternoon light was going yellow. Somewhere out past the fence, a white-tailed doe stepped out of the tree line and stood there, twitching her ears. And then she was gone again. I'll call you when I've got something, Wyatt said. Thank you. Nolan. Yeah. Be careful. If this is what I think it is, these people don't just write letters. I know. No, I mean it. They don't just write letters. Nolan hung up. He sat at the table a long time. The light moved across the floor. Eli made a small sound in his sleep on the couch, and then went still again. The house settled around its bones the way old houses do. He went to the gun cabinet. He took down the 12-gauge his father had given him for his 18th birthday. He checked it. He loaded it. He set it inside the coat closet in the front hall, barrel down, where a man could reach it from the front door or the kitchen without crossing any open ground. He had not kept a loaded gun in the house since Eli had learned to walk. He sat back down at the table with the letter in front of him, and he thought about Lena, 2 miles away, in a house with bolted doors and a shotgun on the nightstand, and he thought about his son breathing evenly under a 9-patch quilt, and he thought about the man in the billboard photograph with his very white teeth, and a cold, clean anger began to rise in him that he had not felt in a long time. The phone rang. He picked it up on the first ring. Lena. He's here. Her voice was a whisper, pressed against the receiver, each word shaped with the care of somebody who could not afford to be heard. Who? A car. A black sedan. It's parked across the road from my house. The engine is running. There's a man inside. He has not gotten out. He has been sitting there for 11 minutes. Stay inside. Lock everything. Do you have your gun? Yes. I'm coming. Nolan, don't... I'm coming, Lena. He hung up. He stood. He looked at his son on the couch. He picked up the phone again and dialed Merle. Merle? Nolan, I need you to come sit with Eli, right now. On my way. He did not wait for an explanation. He hung up and went to the closet and took down the 12-gauge, and he checked it again because his father had taught him to check a loaded gun twice, even if you had loaded it yourself. And he took the keys to the truck off the hook by the door, and he stood in the doorway between the living room and the hall, looking at his sleeping boy. "I'll be back," he said, to the quiet house. Then he went out into the yellow afternoon and he got in the truck and he drove toward Lena's. The drive to Lena's place was 2 miles as the crow flew and 4 by road, because the creek cut between the two properties and the only bridge was a 1/4 mile north, a concrete slab the county had poured in 1978 that everybody called the low water bridge because it wasn't. In a hard rain, it went under. Nolan took it at 40 and felt the truck lift for a second where the concrete dipped toward the water, and then he was across, and the road bent left around a stand of cedars, and her driveway came up on the right. He slowed before he got to it. He killed the headlights, which he didn't strictly need yet because the sun was still up, but he wanted the engine to be the only warning, and he wanted to see the black sedan before it saw him. He saw it. It was parked on the shoulder opposite her driveway, pulled half onto the grass. A newer car, clean, the kind of clean that told you it had never been driven on a gravel road until this afternoon. The windows were tinted. He couldn't see the driver. The engine was running. A thin ribbon of exhaust rose from the tailpipe into the cold air and went sideways in the wind. Nolan pulled his truck in behind it, close enough that the sedan couldn't back out without hitting him. Then he got out, and he left the 12-gauge in the rack behind the seat because he didn't want to be the man who walked up to a stranger's car with a shotgun in his hands. And he walked up the driver's side in the gravel with his hands loose and visible. He tapped on the window with one knuckle. For a long second, nothing happened. Then the window came down, smooth and slow, and a man looked out at him. He was in his 40s, clean-shaven, hair graying at the temples in a way that had been expensive to arrange. He had the kind of face that sold you a used car and then sold you the extended warranty on top of it, and underneath, behind the professional blandness, something harder, something that had done harder things than sell cars. "Help you," the man said. "You lost." "No, sir, because this is a private road past the mailbox. And across the road from the mailbox is a shoulder that belongs to the county, but the county doesn't much like people idling on it. I'm waiting for somebody." "Who?" The man smiled. It was a smile that used only the corners of the mouth. "That's not your business, friend. I'm making it my business." "Are you?" "I am." They looked at each other. The wind moved through the cedars across the road, and somewhere a dog barked twice and stopped. The man's eyes went down Nolan's flannel shirt and his muddy boots and came back up to his face, and whatever he saw there made him rethink for a second the length of the conversation he wanted to have. "You're Hayes," the man said. "I am." "Didn't figure I'd meet you today." "I didn't figure I'd meet you either. What's your name?" "Doesn't matter." "It does to me." "Sure it does." The man looked past Nolan at Lena's house, the front porch, the curtain that had moved once behind the living room window and had gone still. He looked at it the way a man looks at a property he has decided is already his. "You know, Mr. Hayes, you seem like a reasonable person. I'd like us to have a conversation sometime, you and me. Not today. Today I'm just sitting here, but sometime soon. Get off this road. It's a county shoulder. Get off this road." The man smiled again, that same corner-of-the-mouth smile, and he put the window up, smooth and slow, the way he had brought it down. He put the car in gear. Nolan took 2 steps back. The sedan pulled off the shoulder onto the blacktop and it accelerated away toward the highway, unhurried, and Nolan stood there in the gravel watching it until it was a black dot and then nothing. He got the 12-gauge out of the truck. He carried it low along his leg, barrel down, and he walked up Lena's driveway. She opened the front door before he reached the porch. She had the shotgun in her hands, muzzle down. She looked at him, and she looked at the county road behind him, and she looked at the gun in his hand, and she stepped back from the doorway and said, "Come in, please. Just come in." He came in. Her house was small. A little rectangle of rooms, the kitchen opening off the front room, a hallway going back toward what he assumed were the bedroom and bath. The floors were wide pine boards somebody had refinished well. The wood stove in the corner was going, a small orange light at the damper, and the whole place smelled like cedar smoke and coffee and the faint, clean smell of a house lived in by a woman who did not have time to let it get dirty. She bolted the door behind him. 2 bolts, a chain. "He's gone," Nolan said. "For now." "For now?" "Did he say anything?" "He knew my name. Didn't give me his. Said he wanted to have a conversation sometime. Not today." "That's a threat." It's the soft version of one. She set the shotgun against the wall by the door, and then she put her hands over her face. Just for a second, not a breakdown. A pause. When she took them away, her eyes were dry and flat and furious. Nolan? Yeah, he was sitting there for 11 minutes, just sitting there, looking at my house. Like he was... She shook her head. Like he was getting comfortable. I know. I could see his shape through the tint. I could see his head turning when I moved past a window. He wanted me to know he could see me. He wants you to break. I know what he wants. She walked into the kitchen. He followed her because she had started walking and it seemed wrong to stand in the front room alone. She put the kettle on. Her hands did it without asking her. He watched her measure out coffee into a French press with the economy of somebody who had done the motion 1,000 times, and he understood that this was what she did when the world got too big. She made coffee. It was her equivalent of his loading the shotgun. Meridian Vale, he said. She looked up. The letter was in my barrel, he said. I pulled it out. It's them. Meridian Vale Holdings, Kansas City. They offered me $620,000 for my land. What? 620. Nolan, that is... I know. That is insane money for that land. I know. Nobody pays that for 140 acres of rural Missouri pasture unless they're building something on it that makes $620,000 look like a down payment. Wyatt said a resort. He said if you lay our two properties together, it's a $300 million resort. She sat down. She sat down slowly, like a person lowering themselves into cold water. And Meridian Vale isn't real, he said. It's a shell. Wyatt dug into it. It's a company Halverson Group uses when they don't want their name on something. Halverson. Dale Halverson. The billboard guy. The billboard guy. She stared at him. Then she laughed. Once, a short, ugly laugh, with nothing good in it. Of course. Of course it's him. The retirement home thing. My aunt lived in one of those. They moved her out after the foundation started going. She was 81 years old and she had to move in the middle of February because some piece of her ceiling came down over her bed. Lena. I didn't even put it together until you said his name, and now it makes so much sense I want to scream. The kettle went. She got up. She poured the water. Her hands were steady. They were steadier than they had been all day because now she had something to point at, a shape in the dark. He watched her push the plunger down on the French press, slow, even pressure. She poured 2 mugs. Thank you, he said. Don't. Okay. She set his mug in front of him. She sat down across the table. The wood stove ticked in the other room as a piece of wood shifted inside it. What do we do? She said. Wyatt has 48 hours. He wants to look at everything before we go to anybody. The thumb drive, the letter, the messages. 48 hours is a long time when there's a man sitting across the road. I know. He'll come back. I know. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow, or the night after. I know, Lena. She looked at him across the table. She took a sip of her coffee. You can't sit out there on that road for 48 hours. I know. You have a kid. I know. So what are we going to do? He thought about it. The light through her kitchen window was going orange now, the last good light before dusk, and it cut across the table between them and lit up the steam off the coffee cups. You can't stay here alone, he said. I'm not leaving. I didn't say leave. What are you saying? I'm saying somebody needs to be here at night, that's all, not me. You made yourself clear about that, and I understand. Then who? Merle. Who's Merle? Neighbor, 71. Watched Eli for me today. He was my father's best friend, and he's been in and out of that shotgun for longer than I've been alive. He'll come sit on your porch in a rocking chair and drink coffee and watch the road, and anybody who comes up that driveway with bad intentions is going to find that the first person they meet is a man who doesn't bluff. Nolan, I can't ask. You're not asking. I am. I don't know him. You'll know him in 10 minutes. He's that kind. She looked at her coffee. She turned the mug in her hands. He could see her running through the shape of this, measuring the cost of letting another man she didn't know onto her porch against the cost of sitting here alone at 2 a.m. with a shotgun across her knees and a phone that might buzz. One night, she said. One night. Then we see. Okay. I'm going to call him. Okay. He used her phone, which was a cordless with a cracked casing. Merle picked up on the second ring. Nolan did not explain all of it. He said there was somebody worrying a neighbor, and the neighbor needed an overnight, and he, Nolan, needed Merle to be that overnight. Merle said he'd bring his thermos and his .30-06 and be there inside the hour. Nolan thanked him. He hung up. "What's your address for him?" he said. "He'll need it to find the driveway. 4623 County Road N." He called back. He gave the address. He hung up again. "He's coming," he said. "Okay." And then, tomorrow, we start. Start what? We start looking. At what? He sat back in the chair. He turned his own mug in his hands the same way she was turning hers. "My grandfather cleared this land in 1943. He fought in the Pacific and came home and bought it with a loan he never should have gotten because he had nothing, and he spent 20 years paying it off. The papers for all of that are in a filing cabinet in my barn. Deeds, surveys, boundary markers, every piece of correspondence he ever had with the county. I have never once looked through that cabinet because I didn't need to. The land was the land. Everybody knew where the line was, the oak tree at the corner, the cedar post by the creek. Okay. If Halverson is trying to buy us out, somewhere in the story is the reason he thinks he can. There's going to be something about our land, or the line between our two properties, that he's counting on. Some old survey problem, some record that was never filed. Some way to make a claim that, if we don't know the history, we won't be able to fight. People like him, Wyatt says, they don't just make offers. They also make sure that if you say no, there's a knife at your back. So we look at the records. We look at the records, every scrap, mine and yours if you have any, old plat maps, county tax records, anything we can find. And we walk the boundary, together. We find every old marker still in the ground, and we take a picture of it. If he's trying to redraw the line between us, we find out first. When? First light. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. She nodded, slow. She drank her coffee. She set the mug down. Nolan. Yeah, I haven't walked the boundary of my land since the day I bought it. And even then the realtor did it, and I just followed her. I don't know what I'm looking for. I know what you're looking for. Okay? I'll show you. Okay? She was quiet a long moment. Her eyes had gone somewhere else, some middle distance he couldn't follow her into, and then they came back. You're being very calm about this, she said. I'm not calm. You look calm. That's because my father was a very calm man, and I learned from him that when something bad is happening, you don't give it the satisfaction of watching you come apart. You come apart later, when you're alone. That's not healthy. No, it isn't. My therapist would have a lot to say about that. I imagine she would. Something moved in her face, almost a smile. Not quite. Merle's headlights came up the driveway 40 minutes later. Nolan met him at the porch. Merle climbed out of his old F-150, stiff from the cold and the 71 years, with a thermos under one arm and the .30-06 over his shoulder on a sling and a down vest over a flannel shirt over long johns, dressed for the night. He was a thin man, tall, with a white mustache, and the unhurried walk of somebody who had decided decades ago that rushing made a man old faster than time did. Evening, he said. Merle, this is Lena Rowan. Ma'am. Mr. Dursum? Merle, just Merle. Merle, I really appreciate this. It's nothing. It isn't nothing. He gave her a look that was the particular kind old men gave young women when they had decided to be kind without being patronizing, which was a line most men his age had lost their way on a long time ago. Ma'am, I have been sitting on porches at night for the better part of 6 decades, and most of those nights nothing at all happened, and every once in a while something did. It's a trait I have made peace with. Where would you like me? The porch is fine. There's a rocker. A rocker is all I require. I'll bring you blankets. That would be appreciated. She went inside. Merle looked at Nolan. The look they exchanged was the look of 2 men who had known each other since Nolan was in a car seat and did not require a lot of words to cover ground. Bad, Merle said quietly. Yeah. How bad? Halverson bad. Merle's face did not change, but his eyes did, a slow tightening around the corners. That kind of money is a different animal. I know. You got your boy. He's with you tomorrow if you can. Of course he is. Merle. Yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me, Nolan. Your father pulled me out of a combine in 1971. This doesn't come close to even. Lena came back with 2 folded blankets and a pillow. She set them on the rocker. She hesitated for a second in front of Merle, like a young person in front of a school principal, unsure what the protocol was, and then she stuck her hand out. Thank you. You're welcome. He shook her hand once, firm, and let go. I'll be right here all night. You get some sleep. I don't think I can sleep. Try. She went back inside. Nolan lingered at the porch rail a moment longer. Nolan? Yeah. Go home. See your boy. First light. First light. He drove home in the last of the dusk. The road had emptied out. No black sedan, no headlights behind him, nothing but the flat dark of a country evening and the first stars coming up over the ridge. Merle's truck was gone from his own driveway, of course, and when Nolan came through his kitchen door, Eli was at the table eating a sandwich Merle had left him, crust cut off, the way he liked it. Dad. Hey, bud. Merle said there's a lady you're helping. There is. Is she still scared? Less, I think. Good. Nolan sat down across from him. He watched his son eat. He watched the particular way Eli ate his sandwiches, which was to eat the center first in a spiral and leave the crust-adjacent outer ring for last. And he thought, not for the first time, that his son was an entire little person already, with systems and preferences and a whole interior life. And how exactly had that happened when Nolan had not felt most days like he had been paying enough attention? Dad. Yeah. Are you sad? A little. Because of the lady. Because of a lot of things, bud. Do you want me to draw you a raptor? Nolan laughed. Yeah, I do. Eli drew him a raptor. It was better than the morning's raptor. It had a small bubble coming out of its mouth that said, Rhea. He taped it to the refrigerator. He put Eli to bed an hour later than he should have because he did not want to be alone yet. He read him the dog book. He read him the second dog book. He turned out the light. He sat in the kitchen with the letter from Meridian Vale Holdings on the table in front of him. He did not sleep. He sat up in the chair with the 12 gauge across his knees, and he watched his driveway through the kitchen window. And at some point, long after midnight, he dozed sitting up and woke to the gray just before dawn with a stiff neck and a cold cup of coffee and the memory of having dreamed about Rachel, which he had not done in a long time. In the dream, she had not said anything. She had just stood at the end of the pasture in a blue shirt, looking at him, and when he had woken up he had understood, in the strange clear logic of the half-sleeping mind, that she was not upset with him. She was just waiting to see what he did next. He made fresh coffee. He put 2 thermoses of it in the truck. He packed a canvas tool bag with a measuring tape and a can of orange spray paint and a notebook and a digital camera Rachel had given him for Christmas one year that he had never really used, and he looked up the manual online through the slow dial-up he still paid for out of habit, and he figured out how to charge it. He loaded the camera. Eli came down in his pajamas at 6:30. Dad. Morning, bud. Merle's going to come sit with you today. Again. Yeah. Why? Because I have to go help Miss Lena with some paperwork and walk her fence line, and you've already had 2 days of school this week, and we're going to call it a long weekend. It's Tuesday. Roll with it. Merle came. Nolan kissed his son on the top of the head, which Eli bore with the long-suffering dignity of a 6-year-old who had decided he was too old for it, but would allow it to continue out of charity. He drove to Lena's. She was already on the porch when he came up the drive. Merle had left half an hour earlier on his way to Nolan's, and she had, Nolan could see, used the time to put herself together in whatever way she did that in the morning. She had on the canvas jacket again. She had boots on. She had a backpack by her feet. Her hair was in a braid. Morning, she said. Morning. Did you sleep? Some. Did you? Some. Liar. Takes one to know one. He almost smiled. She almost smiled back. She came down the steps with the backpack over one shoulder. Yours first or mine, she said. Yours. Your property is smaller. We do it first. We have your boundary fresh in our heads when we hit the shared line. Makes sense. After that, we do mine, including the creek section. That's where the line between us runs, and if anything's been tampered with, it'll be there. What's in the bag? He showed her the canvas tool bag laid out on the tailgate of his truck. Tape measure, spray paint, notebook, camera, a compass for the old school way. My grandfather's copy of the original plat map. She looked at the plat map. It was folded in quarters, the paper yellowed along the creases, the hand-drawn lines still sharp. A surveyor's mark in the corner. A date. March 3rd, 1943. Nolan. Yeah. This is the actual original. Yeah. Don't you think you should... I'm going to take a picture of it before we go. Good. He did. She held it flat on the hood of the truck and he took 5 pictures of it from different angles. He folded it back up and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his body, where a pocket watch would have gone 100 years ago. They started at the northeast corner of her property, an old cedar post that had a surveyor's pin driven into the top, capped with a flattened brass disc. Nolan knelt and scraped the dirt away from it with a pocket knife. The numbers on the brass were faint but readable. He photographed them. Lena wrote the numbers in the notebook. They moved down the eastern line. The old barbed wire fence ran parallel to the line, but Nolan showed her, not on it. Fences go where it's easy to put them, he said, not necessarily where the survey says the line is. You can lose a lot of land that way, if you're not careful, because after 40 years people start thinking the fence is the boundary. Is that what he's counting on? Could be. They found the second marker, then the third. The third one was hard. The ground around it had been disturbed. Not recently, maybe months ago, but there was a patch of bare earth around the post that didn't match the rest of the line. And when Nolan dug his knife in, the marker was sitting 1.5 inches out of its setting. He sat back on his heels. Lena. What? Somebody pulled this. What? Somebody pulled this marker up out of the ground. Then they put it back. But not quite right. She crouched down next to him. She looked at the dirt. She looked at the post. She looked up at him with the expression of a person who had just understood, in her body, that everything she had been afraid of for 8 months was not paranoia. They were moving the line, she said, trying to, or planning to. If they got the markers out and replaced them 2 feet over, and they did it on a quiet afternoon when nobody was watching, then 6 months from now, when a surveyor comes out to settle a dispute, the markers are where they are, and the old plat map is just a piece of paper, possession, markers, and time. That's how you win a boundary fight in this county. But they didn't replace it 2 feet over. Not yet. This was practice. This was them seeing how easy it was. She sat down right there in the dirt, flat on her butt in the dry grass. He let her. He understood. The anger coming up through her was the kind that needed a minute to find somewhere to land. Those sons of bitches, she said very quietly. Yeah. 8 months of messages, a man in a suit in my driveway, a black car on my road, and now this. Now this. Nolan. Yeah. We're going to get them. We are. Promise me. Lena, I know you can't promise. I know. Say it anyway. He looked at her. She was looking up at him from the dirt, her braid over one shoulder, her hands flat in the dry grass on either side of her, and there was something in her face he did not have a word for, only the recognition that it was the first time in a long time anybody had asked him for a promise he actually wanted to make. We're going to get them, he said. I promise. They found 2 more disturbed markers before they got to the creek, each one the same, pulled and put back, not quite right. Somebody had been on her land more than once, in the dark, with a shovel and a plan. At the creek, the property line jogged where the old map showed it jogging, following the curve of the bank, and Nolan stopped at the water's edge and looked across at his own pasture on the other side. This is where it gets interesting, he said. How? Because when my grandfather and the old man who sold the Pritchard place in the 60s settled this line, they agreed on a handshake deal. The line followed the center of the creek. Wherever the creek moved, the line moved. Most of the time, the creek doesn't move much, but right about, he pointed, right about there, 15 years ago it moved. Flood year. It cut a new channel through the bend and left the old channel as a dry bed. Now, the old plat map says the line is in the middle of the original channel, but the creek, the live water, is 40 feet north of that now, on my side. So whose land is that strip? On paper mine, by the handshake, arguably hers. The former owner, I mean. Nobody cared because nobody was going to build anything there. Until now. Until now. She looked across at the dry creek bed, at the strip of willow and cottonwood that filled in the space between the old channel and the new one. A little ribbon of land maybe 90 feet wide and 300 long, nothing much, just the kind of overgrown river bottom that every farm in the county had a version of. That's what he wants, she said. That strip is what he wants. Part of it. It's where the resort's waterfront would go. If he can get the line moved or muddied, he owns the creek access for the whole project. Without it, all he has is 2 separate parcels with a disputed line between them, which is worthless. So what do? We document everything. Today. Every marker, every inch. We take the photos and the measurements, and we put them together with the plat map, and we build a record that no judge in the state could look at and not believe. And then we don't tell anybody we have it. We keep it in a fireproof box in my barn until we need it. And in the meantime, we don't sell, we don't budge, we don't give them an inch, literally or otherwise, and we wait for them to make a move. And if they make a move we can't predict, then we make one they can't predict either. They worked the rest of the morning. They worked into the afternoon. They found, along the disputed creek section, 3 stakes driven into the ground on the Pritchard side of the old channel, new stakes, orange plastic caps, the kind of stakes a surveyor put down when they were getting ready to file a new plat. None of them were marked with Lena's initials. None of them had been authorized by her. Somebody had put them there in the last few weeks, in a place nobody would see them, betting that by the time anybody did, the paperwork would already be in at the county. Nolan pulled them all, one by one. He put them in the bed of his truck. "Isn't that illegal?" Lena said. "They aren't legal stakes. They weren't put down by a licensed surveyor who informed the landowner. They're just pieces of wood somebody stuck in your ground." "You sound sure." "I am sure. My uncle was a surveyor." They were driving back toward her house with the stakes in the truck bed, the sun going low and red behind the ridge, when his phone rang. He dug it out of his pocket. "Wyatt." "Nolan, I'm only 30 hours in and I have to tell you something I did not expect to be telling you this fast." "Go." "The profile that's been harassing Lena, the metadata on the pictures, the server routing, the timestamps, all of it." "What?" "It's not just somebody hired to do this." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the pictures of her, the ones taken at the grocery store and the gas pump, were taken from inside a car registered to Meridian Vale Holdings. I found the company's fleet list in a filing. Same car, same make, same tint on the windows. I cross-referenced the shadow angles in the photos with the time of day, and I know where the car was parked each time." "Jesus." "Nolan." "Yeah, the messages aren't coming from some hired hacker in another state. They're coming from a man who works directly for Halverson. I've got his employee ID. I've got his badge photo. He's a mid-level guy at the Kansas City office. Title is Risk Mitigation Consultant, which is a nothing title, which means he's their fixer. His name? Garrett Voss." Nolan stopped the truck in the middle of the road. He put it in park. Lena looked at him. "That's the name on the letter," he said. "What?" "The offer letter for my land. Garrett Voss, Director of Acquisitions." There was silence on the line. "Nolan," Wyatt said, "the man who has been threatening her, pretending to be you, is the same man whose signature is on the letter trying to buy your land." "He signed the letter with his own name." "Yes." "Why would he do that? Why would he be that sloppy?" "Because he didn't think anybody would ever put it together. Because he didn't think a single father on 140 acres with a flip phone would ever sit next to the woman he'd been torturing and compare notes." Nolan sat in the middle of County Road N with the engine idling and the sun dying behind the trees and the stakes rattling in the bed of the truck, and he looked across the cab at Lena, and he said very quietly into the phone, "Wyatt." "Yeah. We have him. You have a piece of him. The rest, you're going to have to fight for." "I know." "And Nolan." "Yeah. They're going to know soon that you know. People like this, they have eyes. You've pulled stakes today. You've been on her property with a camera. Somebody's going to notice. When they do, they're going to move." "How fast?" "Faster than you want." Nolan hung up. He looked at Lena. She was waiting, reading his face, and he saw her see the shape of what he had just been told even before he said it. "It's the same man," he said. "The one who sent you the messages. He's the one who signed the letter to me. He works for Halverson directly." She did not say anything for a long moment. She looked out the windshield at the empty blacktop ahead. Her jaw did the hard thing again, the clench and release, and he understood that she was not going to cry. She was not going to let herself. Not now. Not when they were this close to a shape she could finally put her hands on. "Then we stop waiting," she said. "We stop waiting. We take what we have, and we go to the county, and we make noise." "Yes?" "Loud enough that he can't quiet us all." "Yes." He put the truck in gear. The sun was gone behind the ridge now. The first mercury light came on in somebody's barnyard down the road. He drove her home, and he helped her carry the backpack and the camera and the notebook up onto the porch where Merle was already waiting in the rocker with his thermos and his rifle. And he did not kiss her, he did not touch her, because they had not arrived anywhere near that country yet, and neither of them knew the road. But he stood at the bottom of the porch steps a second longer than he had to, and when he looked up at her on the porch with the last red light on her face, she was already looking back down at him, and whatever passed between them in that second was not small, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said a word about it. He drove home. He put his son to bed. He sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of him, and the camera beside it, and the letter from Meridian Vale Holdings at his elbow, and he began slowly and carefully to write down everything he knew, in a list that started with the words October 14th, first message, and went on from there. And he did not stop writing until the kitchen window showed the first gray of the morning coming up over the ridge. The list was 9 pages long by the time the sun was up. Nolan read it through once, sitting at the table with his cold coffee, and he crossed out 3 things that were opinion and not fact. And he added 4 things he had forgotten. And then he folded the pages together and put them in a manila envelope with the photographs from the camera, which he had downloaded to Rachel's old laptop with some difficulty and some cursing under his breath, and he set the envelope on top of the letter from Meridian Vale Holdings. And he stared at the stack of paper on the table the way a man stares at a fuse he has just finished wiring. He called Wyatt at 7. "Wyatt, I'm up. Go. I want to file a complaint with the county. Today." "Okay." "Not the sheriff. I don't trust the sheriff yet. I don't know who he eats lunch with." "Smart. Who do I go to?" Wyatt was quiet a second. Nolan could hear him on his end, drinking something, thinking. "County commissioner. There's 3 of them. The one in your district is a woman named Althea Brill. I looked her up this morning because I figured you'd ask. She's 74, served 3 terms, voted against the last 2 variance requests Halverson brought to the county, lost both votes because the other 2 commissioners outvoted her. She does not like him. That's the one. She won't be enough by herself, but she'll listen. And if she listens, and what you've got is as solid as you think it is, she can push for an emergency session. How fast? Depends on how mad she is when you finish. I can work with that." "Nolan?" "Yeah. Do not go alone." "I won't. Take Lena. Not for protection, for the county. Commissioners listen harder when they can see both people being hurt. 1 man on his own gets a restraining order. 2 people together get an investigation. Okay?" "And Nolan?" "Yeah. The second you file anything on paper, Voss is going to know within hours. He's got people inside. That's how he's been doing this for so long. The minute that complaint hits the clerk's desk, you and Lena become his next problem. Not a slow one, an immediate one." "I know. Get Eli somewhere safe." "Already figured that." He hung up. He called Rachel's sister Joelle, who lived 200 miles south in Rolla, and had been telling him for 4 years that he never let her see the boy enough, and he asked her if she could take Eli for a week. Not a visit. A week. He told her there was some trouble with a neighbor, and he needed the boy away from it. He did not tell her anything more than that, because Joelle was the kind of woman who loved her nephew and her dead sister, and was also the kind of woman who, if she heard the word Halverson, would call 3 cousins and a state senator before Nolan had finished the sentence, and that was not the shape of help he needed yet. She said she'd drive up that morning. She was on the road within an hour. He packed Eli a bag. The boy watched him do it, sitting on the bed with his stuffed dog in his lap. "Dad." "Yeah, bud. How long am I going to Aunt Joelle's?" "A week, maybe. Little more, maybe less." "Why?" "Because I have some things to do that are not for kids, and I would rather do them knowing you're eating cereal on her couch." "Is it about the lady?" "It's about the people who were bothering the lady." "Are
Are they bothering you now? A little. Are they going to come here?
Nolan stopped folding the small pair of jeans in his hands. He sat down on the bed. He put his arm around his son's shoulders, and he pulled him in so the side of his face was against the boy's hair, and he said quietly, because it was the only way he could say it at all, "Eli, I'm going to handle this. I need you to go have cereal on Aunt Joelle's couch for a little while so I can handle it all the way through without having to worry about anything at home. Can you do that for me?" "Yeah, that's my boy." "Dad?" "Yeah." "Are you scared?" "A little." Merle says being a little scared is okay. He said it's the people who aren't scared that scare him. Merle's right. I told him that. Good. Joelle arrived at 10:30. She came up the drive in a minivan full of her own 3 kids, and she hugged Nolan too long in the kitchen and didn't say anything about how thin he looked, which was the kindest thing she had done for him in a long time. She loaded Eli in with her kids. She kissed Nolan on the cheek. "Whatever it is," she said, "call me when it's done, not before. I don't want to know in pieces." "Okay?" "And Nolan?" "Yeah." "Rachel would tell you to finish it." He nodded. He did not trust his voice. She got in the van and she pulled out, and Eli's small face in the back window got smaller, and then the van was around the bend, and then it was gone. He stood in the driveway a long moment. Then he went inside, and he washed his face, and he put on a clean shirt and the coat Rachel had bought him the last Christmas she was alive, because he wanted today to look like a man she would have recognized. He put the manila envelope in an old leather briefcase that had been his father's. He picked up Lena on the way into town. She was waiting on the porch again. She had on a dark sweater and jeans and boots, and her hair was down, and she had done something small with her face that he could not have named but could see. Some effort she had made for a room they were about to walk into. She saw him looking. "Don't," she said, getting in. "I wasn't." "You were." "Okay, I was. You look like you're ready." "I'm not ready. I'm dressed." "Those are different." He pulled onto the road. The county seat was 22 miles north, a small old town around a limestone courthouse, and they drove most of it in silence. Not the silence of strangers, the silence of people who had already said the important things and were now just sharing the weight of them. Althea Brill's office was on the 2nd floor of the courthouse, at the end of a hallway that smelled like old wood and floor wax. Her door was open. She looked up when they came in, and she took them both in with a quick, practiced glance, and she stood up from behind her desk, a small woman with a spine, white hair cut short, reading glasses pushed up on her head. "Mr. Hayes? Commissioner? I was told you needed 15 minutes. We need as many as you can give us. Sit." They sat. He put their briefcase on her desk. He opened it. He laid out the letter from Meridian Vale, the list, the photographs, the printouts Wyatt had emailed that morning with Garrett Voss's employee ID and badge photo, the plat map from 1943, the images of the disturbed survey markers, and the 3 orange stakes he had pulled from the creek bed, which he had brought in wrapped in a feed sack, and which he now unwrapped and placed across her desk like evidence in a trial. She looked at it all without speaking for nearly a full minute. "Who else has seen this?" she said. "Nobody. My brother-in-law put some of it together. Nobody at the sheriff's office, nobody at the county. You're the first." "Why me?" "Because you voted against Halverson twice, and the second time you lost, and you have been quoted in the paper saying that you do not believe he has ever filed an honest application in this county." "You read the paper." "I read it when it matters." She almost smiled. She did not quite. "Ms. Rowan?" "Yes, ma'am." "These messages. How long?" 8 months. "Did you save them?" "All of them." "Did you ever once believe Mr. Hayes was the one sending them?" "Yes, ma'am. I believed it until I stood on his porch with a shotgun in my hand and looked at his face and understood I was wrong." "How did you understand?" "Because the man in the messages was cruel, and the man on the porch was frightened." Althea Brill took her glasses down off her head and put them on her nose. She picked up the photograph of Garrett Voss's badge. She looked at it. She set it down. She picked up the letter on Meridian Vale letterhead. She looked at the signature. She set it down. She picked up one of the stakes. She turned it in her hand. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes. If I call an emergency session of the commission for tomorrow afternoon, and I put this in front of the other 2 commissioners and the county council and the state's attorney's office, Will you stand up in that room and say, publicly, on the record, everything you have just put on my desk? Yes. Ms. Rowan, will you? Lena sat very still for a second. Then she said, yes. You understand the people on the other side of this have money and lawyers and a history of making life unpleasant for people who stand up against them. I understand. And you still intend to stand up? Yes, ma'am. Althea Brill took her glasses off. She folded them. She set them on the desk. I have waited, she said, a long time for a citizen in this county to walk into my office with a stack of paper like this. I'm going to call the session. Be here tomorrow at 2. Bring everything. Bring your brother-in-law if you can. Bring anybody else you've found who has been hurt by these people, if you can find them by tomorrow. And Mr. Hayes. Yes, I am going to trust you to do what you said you would do. If you do not, I will look like a fool, and I do not enjoy looking like a fool at 74. Do we understand each other? We do. They left her office, down the stairs, out the front of the courthouse into the sharp bright of a November noon. Lena did not say anything until they were at the truck. Then she put both her hands flat on the hood, and she leaned on them, and she breathed for a long time. Okay, she said. Okay. We did that. We did. Now what? Now we find other people. How? Wyatt sent me a list this morning. 3 other landowners in this county got offers from Meridian Vale in the last year. 2 of them accepted. 1 turned them down and has been, quote, having trouble since. We find him. Today. Nolan. Yeah. This is happening very fast. I know. I'm scared. I know, Lena. I'm not telling you so you'll fix it. I'm telling you because you are the only person I have to tell it to. He looked at her over the hood of the truck. Her hands were flat on the metal. Her shoulders were pulled in. He had known her less than 3 days, and he understood, watching her stand there in the courthouse parking lot, that he was not going to unknow her, that whatever came next, he was going to come next with her in it. I know, he said again, quieter. Me too. The man who had turned down Meridian Vale's offer and been punished for it was a widower named Thomas Quillen, 78, who ran 110 acres of cattle ground along the same creek, 6 miles downstream. Wyatt had found him through tax records. Nolan and Lena drove out. Thomas Quillen came out of his barn with a hand shovel and a deep suspicion of strangers, and he stood in his own driveway listening to Nolan explain who they were and what they had. And his face did a slow thing that Nolan had seen before, the face of a man who had been waiting a long time for somebody to believe him. Come inside, Quillen said. He had a kitchen that had not been updated since 1978. He poured them bad coffee and he sat them down at a table with a red and white checked plastic cloth. And he told them, in the flat, low voice of a man who had told the story too many times to people who had not listened, that he had refused an offer from Meridian Vale 11 months ago, and that since then his fences had been cut, his mailbox had been run over twice, his well had been mysteriously contaminated with something that took 4 weeks and $6,000 to fix, and a man had called his daughter in St. Louis and told her that her father was being investigated for insurance fraud, which he was not. I couldn't prove it was them, Quillen said. I knew in my bones, but I couldn't prove it. We can prove it, Nolan said. Some of it. Son, I'm 78 years old. My wife is dead. My daughter won't come visit because she thinks I'm paranoid. I don't have the fight left for this. You don't have to fight. You just have to stand in a room tomorrow and tell the truth. Quillen looked at him. He looked at Lena. He looked out the window at his own pasture. What time? 2 o'clock, county courthouse. I'll be there. They drove back in the late afternoon. The sun was going orange again, the way it did in November, early and hard. Lena sat with her head against the passenger window watching the fence posts go by. Nolan? Yeah. That man has been losing sleep for a year because of this. I know. There are probably more of him. Probably. Haverson has been doing this for years. Yeah. How many people? He didn't answer. There wasn't an answer. They drove the last mile in silence. At her driveway, he stopped the truck. She didn't get out. You want to come in, she said. Lena, I'm not asking like that. I'm asking because I don't want to eat dinner alone tonight, and I don't think you do either. He killed the engine. She made them sandwiches. Tomato and cheese on thick bread, the kind of meal a person made when they had run out of decision-making capacity for the day. They ate at her kitchen table. Merle came by with a thermos and took up his spot on the porch, and they were, for the first time in 3 days, safe enough inside a room to sit still. Nolan. Yeah. What were you like before? Before what? Before she died. He chewed, he swallowed, he thought about it. Lighter, he said.
Tell me something lighter about you. I used to dance. You did not. I did. Rachel made me. We took a class, 1 night a week for 6 months. I was terrible, and she was good, and she thought it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to her. She used to put on a record in the kitchen at 10 o'clock at night and make me dance with her in front of the sink. What record? Anything. She wasn't picky. She just liked to move. What happened to the records? They're in a box in the attic. Nolan. Yeah. Take them out of the attic. Maybe I will. He did not promise her. She did not push him. They ate their sandwiches. Later, when the light was gone and the porch light was on, he stood up to leave, and she walked him to the door, and she put her hand on his wrist for exactly 2 seconds before she took it away again. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. He drove home. He slept a little, not much. He was up at 5. He put on the coat again. He picked Lena up at noon. They stopped at Thomas Quillen's, and Quillen was waiting on his porch in a suit that had probably last been worn to his wife's funeral, and he climbed in the back of the truck cab without a word, and they drove to the courthouse together. The commission room was full. Althea Brill had not been idle. She had called the other 2 commissioners. She had called the county council. She had called a reporter from the local paper and a reporter from a Kansas City paper. And she had called, Nolan learned later, a woman at the state's attorney's office who had been trying to make a case against Halverson Group for 2 years and had never been able to put enough in one pile. All of them were in the room. So was Garrett Voss. He had come on short notice in a charcoal suit, flanked by 2 lawyers, and he sat in the front row with the face of a man who had shown up to put out a small grease fire and was only just now beginning to smell the gasoline. Nolan did not look at him when he walked in. He did not trust his face yet. Althea Brill called the session to order. She said she had been presented with evidence of a coordinated scheme to defraud landowners in the county involving forged survey markers, shell companies, and the use of digital impersonation to harass a private citizen. She said she had asked Mr. Nolan Hayes to present that evidence. She said she would answer any procedural questions after. She sat down. Nolan stood up. He did not use notes. He had thought, the night before, that he would. He had written an outline. When he stood up in the room and looked out at the faces and saw Althea Brill at the front with her reading glasses on her nose, and saw Lena in the second row with her hands folded in her lap, and saw Thomas Quillen in the third row in his old funeral suit, and saw Garrett Voss in the front row with the small, sick smile of a man losing control of a room, he found that he did not need the outline. He told it plain. He told them about the morning Lena had come onto his porch with a shotgun. He told them about the phone and the face on the screen and the realization that somebody had built a him out of photographs and lies. He told them about the burn barrel and the letter from Meridian Vale and the $620,000. He told them what Wyatt had found. He told them that Meridian Vale was a shell, and that Halverson Group owned the shell, and that the man who had signed the letter offering to buy his land was the same man whose car had been used to photograph Lena at gas stations for 8 months. He put the badge photo of Garrett Voss up on the easel Althea Brill had arranged. He put the letter with Voss's signature next to it. He waited, just a second, for the room to see. The room saw. He told them about the survey markers pulled out of the ground on Lena's property and put back wrong. He told them about the orange stakes in the creek bed. He told them about Thomas Quillen's fences and his well and his daughter in St. Louis. He asked Thomas Quillen to stand, and Thomas Quillen stood, and he said, in his flat, low voice, "Every word of that is true. They did it to me. They tried to do it to these 2. If you do not stop them today, they will do it to somebody else tomorrow." He sat back down. Nolan turned to Garrett Voss. "You sent me a letter," he said, "offering to buy my land. You signed it with your own name. You also sent a woman 8 months of messages pretending to be me. You signed those too, in a way. With my face. You got sloppy. You got sloppy because you thought we were simple.
You thought a single father on a flip phone and a woman trying to get away from her past would never sit down at a kitchen table and lay the two things side by side. We did. We laid them side by side. And the thing about sloppy is that once somebody sees it, they cannot unsee it. Garrett Voss did not say anything. His lawyers were already whispering to him. One of them had a hand on his arm. His face had gone a color that was not quite white.
I have a 6-year-old son, Nolan said. I sent him to stay with his aunt this week because I did not want him in the house when you decided how far you were going to take this. I want you to think about that. I want every person in this room to think about that. I want it on the record that a man in this county sent his child away to be able to stand in front of you and tell the truth, because he was afraid of what you would do if the child was home. The room was quiet. Even the scratching of the reporter's pen had stopped. Althea Brill took her glasses off her nose. Mr. Voss, she said. Commissioner, my client, I was speaking to Mr. Voss. Mr. Voss, do you wish to respond? Voss opened his mouth, closed it. His lawyer stood. Commissioner, we haven't had the opportunity to review this so-called evidence, and it would be inappropriate for my client to respond to accusations that have not been. Sit down, counselor. Mr. Voss will have every opportunity to respond through proper channels. This session is not a trial. It is a finding. I am asking the clerk to record that this commission has been presented with credible evidence of a coordinated fraud, and I am referring the matter formally to the state's attorney's office and to the county sheriff with instructions that a criminal investigation be opened immediately. Any transaction currently pending involving properties held or sought by Meridian Vale Holdings in this county is hereby stayed pending that investigation. Is there any objection from my fellow commissioners? There was not. Motion carries. Session is adjourned. The room did not empty right away. People wanted to talk. The reporters wanted statements. Althea Brill shepherded Nolan and Lena and Thomas Quillen out the side door with the economy of a woman who had been doing crisis management since before most of the reporters were born, and she walked them down to her office, and she shut the door, and she leaned against it. Well, she said. Well, Nolan said, you did not tell me about the 6-year-old. It wasn't in the evidence. It was a hell of a thing to put in the room. It was true. She looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Hayes, in 40 years of public service, I have seen perhaps 4 people walk into a room and do what you just did. You should be proud of yourself in a way you probably won't allow yourself to be until later. I'm telling you now so that when later comes, you remember. He did not know what to say to that. He said nothing. She turned to Lena. Ms. Rowan, you all right? No, ma'am, but I will be. Good answer. She let them out. In the hall, the reporters were still waiting. Nolan gave a short statement. He said nothing about his son. He said only that he and Miss Rowan were grateful to the commission for its swift action and that they hoped the investigation would find the truth, and that he had nothing further to add at this time. Lena said even less. Thomas Quillen said, No comment, thank you, ma'am, to a young woman from Kansas City, and walked past her with the straight back of a man who had waited a long time to feel straight. They drove him home first. He shook Nolan's hand in his driveway. He held it a second longer than a handshake. Son. Yeah. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. I do. Don't argue with an old man. Yes, sir. He walked to his porch. He did not look back. Nolan put the truck in gear. He drove Lena home in the dusk. Neither of them spoke for most of it. At her driveway, she did not get out right away. Nolan. Yeah. Is it over? The public part. The loud part. That's done. What comes next is lawyers and investigators and a lot of paperwork. And it'll take months. And it won't be as clean as today. Will he come after us? Voss? He can't. Not the same way. Too many eyes on him now. He'll be arrested inside the week, Wyatt says. And Halverson will be next, although slower, because a man with that much money doesn't go down without taking a year of everybody's life with him. But the markers, the creek, your land, mine. Safe. For now. She nodded. She sat a moment longer, then she put her hand on the door handle and did not open it. Nolan. Yeah. I don't know what this is. I don't either. I don't know if I'm ready for anything.
I'm not asking you to be. I know you're not. That's the problem. I keep waiting for you to ask for something because everybody asks for something and you haven't, and I don't know what to do with that. Lena.
What? Go inside, lock your doors, sleep in your own bed. I'll call you tomorrow. On the kitchen phone.
She looked at him. The dusk had gone almost to full dark. The porch light was on. Merle's truck was parked at the end of her driveway, and Merle was on the porch already, invisible in the shadow. Okay, she said. She got out. She walked up to the porch. She stopped at the top step, and she turned, and she raised a hand once, and he raised a hand back. And then she went inside, and the door closed, and the bolt went home. He sat in the truck a moment longer. He looked at the house, and at the porch light, and at the cold, clean November stars coming up over the ridge. And he understood, sitting there, that something very long had just ended, and that something he did not yet have a name for had, without asking him, begun. He drove home through the dark. The road was empty. The house, when he came up the drive, was dark too, and for the first time in 4 years, that darkness did not feel like grief. It felt like a house waiting for its people to come home. He went inside. He took the 12-gauge out of the closet and put it back in the cabinet. He locked the cabinet. He put the key on the high shelf where it had always gone, before, in the years when a child walked through these rooms and a man could not afford to be casual about the things in them. He climbed the stairs. He went into Eli's room. He sat on the edge of the empty bed, with the stuffed dog on the pillow looking at him, and he let himself, for the first time in 3 days, feel how tired he was. He felt it all the way through, down into the soles of his feet. He did not cry. He had never been much of a crier, but he sat there a long time with his hands on his knees and his breath coming even and his eyes on the stuffed dog, and when he stood up to go to his own room, he felt a half-inch lighter and a half-inch taller and a half-inch more like a man his wife might, wherever she was, have recognized. He went to bed. He slept. He slept all the way through the night, without dreams, and when the gray of morning came up over the ridge, he was still asleep, and the phone did not ring, and no car came up the drive, and the quiet that had been broken 3 days before was, for the first time, beginning to put itself slowly back together around him. The months that followed were not clean. Nothing true ever is. Garrett Voss was arrested on a Thursday, 8 days after the commission meeting, at a Kansas City airport with a carry-on bag and a ticket to a city he had no business being in. The charges ran long: wire fraud, stalking, forgery, conspiracy. His lawyers did what lawyers do. They delayed. They filed motions. They argued with straight faces that their client had been overzealous in pursuing what he had believed to be a legitimate business opportunity, and the word overzealous made Lena laugh out loud when Nolan read it to her from the newspaper at her kitchen table, and he had not heard her laugh like that before, and he thought about the sound of it for days afterward. Dale Halverson went down slower, the way Wyatt had said he would. The state's attorney spent 3 months building a case that did not leak, and when she finally filed, she filed hard. 22 counts, a racketeering charge that had been waiting for him, it turned out, for years. He did not go to prison immediately because men with that kind of money never did, but he lost the company, and he lost the billboards, and he lost, one by one, the friends who had eaten at his table when eating at his table cost nothing. By spring, the shell companies had been unwound, and the properties Meridian Vale had bought up had been put into receivership, and the families who had sold under pressure were being contacted one at a time by a young prosecutor named Dana Sills, who had made it her personal project to see that every last one of them got the chance to buy their land back at the price they had sold it for. Thomas Quillen's daughter came home from St. Louis the second weekend in December. She stayed 4 days. When she left, she hugged him in his driveway and told him she had been wrong, and he told her she had not been wrong, she had been worried, which was the kindest correction any father has ever given a daughter, and she cried, and he drove her to the bus station without making her feel bad about any of it. 2 other families, once the story broke, came forward on their own. Then another. Then another. By the time the trial date was set, 11 people in 3 counties had added their testimony to the record. Althea Brill, in the kind of remark that got her reelected a 4th time, although she had sworn she would not run again, told the Kansas City paper that every small county in the state had a Halverson, and that the only way they ever got caught was when 2 ordinary people who had been set against each other got tired of being used and sat down and compared notes. Eli came home from Joel's the Monday after the commission meeting. He walked in through the kitchen door with his bag over his shoulder and his stuffed dog under his arm, and he looked around the kitchen as if he were checking to see if everything was where he had left it, and then he looked up at his father and said, "I missed the raptor on the fridge." "The raptor missed you, bud. Did you finish the thing you were doing?" "I finished the loud part. The rest takes a while." "Are the bad people in trouble?" "Yeah." "Good." He went upstairs to put his bag away. Nolan stood in the kitchen and watched his son's sock feet disappear up the stairs, and he listened to the small familiar sounds of a boy putting his things back exactly where they belonged. And he did not move for a long time, because if he moved, he was going to have to do something with his face that he was not prepared to do. Lena came over on a Wednesday, the first week of December. She did not call first. Her Bronco came up the drive at 10 in the morning, and Nolan looked up from the kitchen table where he was paying a stack of bills. And he watched her get out and walk to the porch, and he met her at the door before she could knock. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. "You live 2 miles away." "Hence." "Come in." She came in. Eli was at school. The house was quiet in the particular way it was quiet when a boy was not in it. She looked around. It was the first time she had been inside. "It's a good house," she said. "It's an old house." "That's why it's a good house. He made coffee." She sat at the table and watched him do it, and he was conscious, in a way he had not been conscious in a long time, of what his kitchen looked like to a stranger. The chipped edge of the counter where a pan had fallen off the drying rack, the curtains above the sink that Rachel had sewn when they were first married, and that he had not taken down. The refrigerator with a raptor on it, and a snowman, and a piece of paper that said EGLIH in red crayon, which was Eli's name phonetically rendered on his 3rd day of kindergarten, and which Nolan could not bring himself to throw away, even though Eli now rolled his eyes whenever he saw it. "Nolan." "Yeah." "I came to ask you something." "Okay." "I've been going to Merle's on Thursdays. Did you know that?" "I did not." "He's been teaching me to make biscuits. Badly. Very badly. His biscuits are like hockey pucks, but he has this theory that if he explains the theory enough, eventually the theory will happen, and I have been humoring him because I think he's lonely, and because, if I'm honest, so am I." "Okay, so what I came to ask is, Thursday nights after the biscuits, would you and Eli come eat them with us?" He looked at her. She was looking at her coffee, not at him, and he saw that her hands were wrapped around the mug for something to do, and that her shoulders were up by her ears the smallest amount. "Lena." "Yeah." "Are you asking me out on a biscuit date?" "I'm asking you to a weekly dinner with a 71-year-old man who does not understand ratios. And I am asking you to bring your son, because I like your son, and because eating dinner with 3 people feels like survival, and eating dinner with 4 feels like a life." "Yes." "Yes, to which part?" "All of it." She let out a breath. Not a big one. The kind a person lets out when they had been holding it for longer than they'd realized. She looked up at him. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Thursday." The first Thursday, Merle's biscuits were terrible. They crunched. Eli bit into one and made a face that was the entire history of diplomacy on a 6-year-old, and then he ate the whole thing out of loyalty, and Merle, watching him, laughed so hard he had to put his coffee down. Lena laughed. Nolan laughed. The 4 of them sat in Merle's kitchen until well past dark. And at one point, Eli crawled up into Lena's lap without asking permission from anybody, including Lena, and fell asleep there with his head against her collarbone. And she looked at Nolan across the table with an expression he could not read except that he knew, whatever it was, he wanted to see it again. The Thursdays piled up. They became a thing. Merle's biscuits got marginally better. Eli started asking on Tuesdays if it was biscuit day yet, and Nolan would say no, and Eli would say, "But is it almost?" And Nolan would say, "Yes, bud, it's almost." In January, Lena came over on a Sunday afternoon to help him pull down the attic ladder. She had asked if he had found the records, the box of records, and he had said no. He had not. He had been thinking about it and not done it, and she had said, in the direct way that was the thing about her he had come to count on, that thinking about it was not going to get it done, and that she would come over Sunday and help him, so she came over Sunday. The box was in the corner of the attic behind an old Christmas tree stand. It was heavier than he remembered. He carried it down. She followed him with a second, smaller box she had pulled out from behind the first. They sat on the living room floor with Eli between them, and they opened the larger box, and inside were the records Rachel had made him dance to in the kitchen. 74 of them, all in their sleeves. Somebody had alphabetized them. She alphabetized them, he said. Of course she did. He pulled one out at random. He put it on the old turntable that had been his father's, that had sat in the corner of the living room under a towel for 4 years. He plugged the turntable in. He blew the dust off the needle. He dropped the needle. It was a song he had not heard in a long time, a woman's voice, slow, a piano behind her. Lena stood up. She put her hand out to him. I don't, he said. I know. I'm not any good. I know. Come on. He got up. He took her hand. Eli, on the floor, watched them with the wide, serious eyes of a child who understood, without being told, that something was happening that he was not going to interrupt. Nolan put his other hand on Lena's waist. She put hers on his shoulder. They moved, slow, not well, in the small space between the couch and the coffee table, and at some point, a minute in, she put her forehead against his collarbone and he put his chin on the top of her head. And they stopped pretending it was about the dancing. Dad, Eli said from the floor. Yeah, bud. Are you dancing with Miss Lena? I am. Is she your girlfriend now? Nolan felt Lena laugh against his chest, a small, tired, happy laugh. He waited. Would that be okay with you, bud? He said. Eli considered this, in the very serious way he considered every question of importance. He looked at Lena. He looked at his father. He tilted his head. Yeah, he said. That would be okay. Lena did not cry. She did not look at Nolan. She just kept her forehead where it was, and after a second she said, in a voice Eli could not hear, You are going to wreck me. I'll try not to. Don't try too hard. The trial came and went. Garrett Voss took a plea. He went to federal prison for 11 years, which was less than Nolan had hoped and more than he had expected. Halverson's case went to a jury. The jury was out for 3 days. They came back with convictions on 17 of the 22 counts. His sentencing hearing was in April, and Althea Brill drove herself to it, and she sat in the back of the courtroom with her glasses on her nose and her hands folded in her lap. And when the judge pronounced 18 years, she nodded once to herself and walked out without speaking to any of the reporters in the hall. The boundary between Nolan's property and Lena's was resurveyed in May. A licensed surveyor this time, paid for by the county out of a fund that had been, Althea Brill said with the barest hint of satisfaction, seized from Meridian Vale's assets. The markers were put back in the ground properly. The creek section was adjudicated, and the strip of willow and cottonwood between the old channel and the new was split down the middle in a handshake agreement between Nolan and Lena that neither of them recorded, because, as Nolan said, a handshake had held for 60 years between his grandfather and the man who had sold the Pritchard place, and he did not see why it needed paper now. In June, the cedar post at the northeast corner of her land, the one they had found first that cold morning in November, got a new brass disc on the top, fresh and shining, and Lena took a picture of it and printed it out and stuck it to her refrigerator. And when Nolan asked her why, she said, Because it's the first thing I ever fought for in my life, that I won. The house began to hold a different kind of quiet. Not the old one. The old one had been a quiet of absence, of a woman's voice no longer in the kitchen, of a dog's feet no longer on the stairs, of a marriage that had been there and then, suddenly and for no good reason, not. The new quiet was the quiet of a house where people were, just now, not making noise. It was temporary. It was a quiet between things. A quiet that knew noise was coming and was, for a minute, resting. Lena did not move in. They had talked about it in February and decided together that not yet was the right answer. She still needed her own door to lock. He still needed to not rush. Eli was 6, and then, in March, he was 7, and he needed things to change slowly, at the speed a boy could handle. So she kept her house. She was at his 4 nights a week. He was at hers the others. Merle, who had found, in his old age, that he had accidentally acquired a family, took to showing up on weekends with a pie or a stack of lumber for some project he had decided needed doing, and Nolan stopped telling him he did not have to, because it was clear that he did. On a warm evening at the end of April, Nolan sat on the top step of his porch with a beer in his hand, watching Eli and Lena in the pasture. They were trying to teach a goat to walk on a leash, which was Eli's project and which Lena had agreed to help with because she was, Nolan had come to understand,
constitutionally incapable of telling the boy no about anything that involved an animal. The goat was not cooperating. Eli was laughing so hard he had fallen over. Lena was standing in the grass with the leash in her hand and her head tipped back and the late sun on her face. And she was laughing too, and Nolan watched them from the porch. And he thought about the morning she had come up his driveway with a shotgun in her hand and a phone full of pictures of a man who was not him. He thought about what would have happened if he had, that morning, been a different man. A man who had met her anger with his own. A man who had said, "Get off my property," before she could say the thing she needed to say. Who had let his pride be the loudest thing in the room. He thought about the simple decision in a 2-second window to put his hands where she could see them and ask her name. It had not felt at the time like a decision. It had felt like the only thing to do. But he understood now, watching a woman he loved chase a goat across his father's pasture, that almost nothing in a life turned on the big decisions. The big decisions announced themselves and gave a man time to prepare. What a life turned on were the small ones, the 2-second ones, the ones a man made without noticing he had made them, and which, looking back, were the only ones that had ever mattered. Somebody had wanted to take this from him. Somebody with more money than a man could spend in 10 lifetimes had decided, in an office in a tower he had never seen, that a widower on 140 acres and a woman running from her past were two small problems that could be solved with a bad man and a fake profile and a little patience. He had not counted on them sitting down at a kitchen table. He had not counted on a boy who asked whether a raptor was faster than a cheetah. He had not counted on a 71-year-old man with a thermos and a rifle in a rocking chair at 2 a.m. He had not counted on an old woman commissioner with white hair and a spine, who had been waiting 40 years for one good file to land on her desk. He had not counted, in the end, on the simplest thing. He had not counted on kindness, which was the one thing his kind of money could not reliably buy. The goat made a break for it. Eli yelled. Lena ran after it, half laughing, half swearing in a way she tried to keep Eli from hearing, and that Eli, Nolan knew, was filing away for later. The goat vanished into the tree line. "Dad!" Eli yelled. "Yeah, bud? We lost the goat." "I see that. Are you going to come help us?" Nolan stood up. He set the beer on the porch rail. He walked down the steps into the long grass, and the sun was low and gold across the pasture, and his son was running and his woman was running. And somewhere out past the fence the creek was doing what creeks did, which was to go on, in its own time, toward a river that would take it, eventually, to a sea. "Coming," he said. He walked out into the field. He did not know that evening how many more evenings there would be. Nobody ever did. But he knew, for the first time in 4 years, that there would be more of them, and that he was going to be in them, and that he was not going to spend the ones he had left bracing for the ones he might not get. That was the thing grief had tried to teach him, and failed. That was the thing this strange violent winter had, in its own backward way, finally made him learn. A life was not a thing you held. It was a thing you walked into. And the measure of a man was not what he saved from it, or what he lost, or what was taken from him by men with enough money to think they could take anything. The measure of a man was who he walked into the field for, when the field was all he had left, and the light was going, and the goat was gone, and the laugh of the woman ahead of him was the only direction he needed. He caught up to them at the tree line. The goat was standing in a patch of sun looking pleased with itself. Lena had the leash. Eli had grass in his hair. They turned when they heard him coming, and they waited for him. And when he reached them, Lena put her hand in his without making it a thing, and Eli leaned against his leg without making it a thing. And the 4 of them, man and woman and boy and goat, stood there in the last of the light and went home.